There is a moment, right before the kill, when the wolf stops running. It stands completely still, watching, calculating, and in that silence, something ancient and terrifying stirs behind its eyes. Because the wolf isn't just hungry, the wolf is thinking. For centuries, we told ourselves a story. We said predators were simple. We said they acted on instinct. We said they were wild, reactive, chaotic. We were wrong, dead wrong. And the more scientists looked, the more they realized something that should have frightened us far sooner. Wolves don't just hunt, they plan. And what they've been doing in the shadows of forests, across frozen tundras, in valleys where no human eye watches, is something that looks less like animal behavior and more like a war strategy drawn up by a general who has never lost. This is not a story about wolves being dangerous. This is a story about wolves being intelligent in ways that expose something deeply uncomfortable about our place in the natural world. Let's go back to where it starts. Not with a howl, not with a chase, with a stare. Long before the first wolf was domesticated into a dog, long before mythology turned them into monsters or fairy tales made them villains, wolves existed as the apex architects of ecosystems. 50,000 years ago, they roamed every continent on Earth except Antarctica and Australia. They were everywhere, and they did not survive that long by being mindless. The wolf pack is not simply a family unit. It is a command structure. There is an alpha, not because they are the most violent, but because they are the most capable, the most emotionally intelligent, the most strategically aware. Studies have shown that wolf alphas de-escalate conflict within the pack, maintaining cohesion, directing movement, and coordinating hunts with a precision that stunned researchers the first time they truly documented it. But it was Yellowstone that changed everything. In 1926, wolves were completely eradicated from Yellowstone National Park. Hunters, traps, government-sanctioned extermination campaigns. They were gone. And what followed was a slow, invisible catastrophe that took decades to fully understand. Elk populations exploded. Grazing became unchecked. Riverbanks eroded. Trees vanished. Songbirds disappeared. Fish populations collapsed. A single predator's absence unraveled an entire world. Then, in 1995, wolves were reintroduced, 14 gray wolves brought back from Canada. And what happened over the next decade became known as one of the most astonishing ecological transformations ever recorded. The rivers changed course. Literally, the rivers moved. Because the wolves didn't just kill elk, they changed where the elk grazed, which allowed vegetation to return to riverbanks, which stabilized the soil, which altered the hydrology of the entire valley. Scientists called it a trophic cascade. But there is another way to look at it. The wolves didn't just hunt. They reorganized a landscape. And that's when researchers began paying much closer attention to how they hunted, not just what happened after. What they found was not the chaotic chase most people imagine. It was something else entirely, something deliberate, something that, the more you examine it, the harder it becomes to explain away as mere instinct. A wolf pack does not approach prey randomly. Before any movement begins, there is observation. Hours of it. Wolves will watch a herd of elk from a distance, sometimes an entire day, doing nothing but reading the group. They are not waiting for hunger to force their hand. They are gathering information. Researchers tracking packs in Yellowstone observed something remarkable. Wolves consistently ignore healthy animals, even when those animals are closer and easier to reach. Instead, they identify the weak, the injured, the old, the one elk on the edge of the herd that moves slightly differently, the one that breaks stride once every 100 steps, an irregularity so subtle that a human observer, even with binoculars, would miss it entirely. The wolf does not miss it. And then, when the wolves finally move, they don't just chase. They orchestrate. This is where it gets dark. Different wolves in the pack take different roles, and those roles are not random. Some wolves function as drivers, pushing the prey in a specific direction. Others hold position at angles, cutting off escape routes that the prey hasn't even considered yet. And one or two, the most experienced hunters, wait, positioned at a point the prey is being funneled toward without knowing it. The elk doesn't see a trap. It sees only the wolves behind it. It runs, straight into what was already waiting. Biologist Rick McIntyre spent more than 10,000 hours observing wolf behavior in Yellowstone. More time watching wolves than almost any human in recorded history. What he documented shattered the old narrative of the brutish, mindless predator. He watched wolves develop reputations within their packs. He watched them make decisions that could only be described as tactical adaptations based on previous failures. If a hunting strategy didn't work last time, they didn't repeat it. They changed it. That is not instinct. That is learning. That is memory applied to strategy. But the full weight of what wolves are capable of didn't truly land until researchers began studying winter hunts. Because winter is where the mask comes off. In deep snow, wolves have a profound advantage. Their paws distribute weight across a wider surface area than hooves. An elk, crashing through snowpack, sinks with every stride. A wolf glides, and wolves know this. During winter conditions, packs will pursue prey for distances far longer than they would attempt in summer. Not out of desperation, but because the calculation has changed. The physics now favor them. They wait for winter on purpose. And in those long, brutal pursuits, sometimes stretching across miles, sometimes lasting over an hour, something else emerges. Something that looks almost unbearably like patience. There is a documented behavior called prey testing. A wolf will approach a large animal, a bison, a moose, and make a short, provocative charge, not to attack, to react. It watches how the animal responds. Does it run? Does it turn to fight? Does it hesitate? Each response tells the wolf something. A healthy bison turns and charges back. The wolf retreats, not in fear, but in assessment. This one is not worth it. Not today. But the bison that hesitates, that bison has just revealed something it cannot take back. The wolves remember. There is a recorded case from Isle Royale, the isolated island in Lake Superior, where one of the longest-running predator-prey studies in history has unfolded over 6 decades. Researchers watched a pack of wolves spend 3 days near a single moose. They didn't attack. They circled, rested, circled again. On the 3rd day, the moose, exhausted, stressed, showing early signs of a condition the wolves could not have named but clearly sensed, finally broke, and the wolves were already in position. 3 days. 3 days of stillness and watching for one kill. That is not an animal reacting to hunger. That is an animal executing a plan. And here is where the reflection cuts deepest. We have spent thousands of years studying wolves, fearing wolves, worshiping wolves, slaughtering wolves. We gave them myths. We gave them fairy tales. We gave them the starring role in our oldest nightmares. And all along, they were doing something quietly extraordinary in the spaces between our stories about them. They were solving problems, not with language, not with tools, not with anything we would recognize as intelligence from the outside looking in. And that, perhaps, is why it took us so long to see it. 45% of wolf hunts fail. That number is worth sitting with for a moment. Nearly half the time, after all that strategy and coordination and patience, the wolves walk away empty. They don't always win, but they always adapt. They always return. They always watch the same herd again with the same cold, unhurried calculation. There is something in that persistence that feels less like animal behavior and more like a philosophy. The wolf does not mourn its failure. It studies it. And so we arrive at the uncomfortable truth that hides inside all of this. We did not fear wolves because they were dangerous. We feared wolves because some ancient wordless part of us recognized something in the way they moved, the way they watched, the way they waited with a patience that feels less like nature and more like intention. We looked into the yellow eyes of a predator and saw something looking back. Not hunger, not rage, thought. The forests are quieter now in most of the world. Wolves occupy a fraction of their former range. We pushed them to the edges, and in pushing them there, we unraveled ecosystems we didn't even know we depended on, because we never understood the full architecture of what they were building while we weren't watching. They're still out there, in the high country, in the deep winter, in the low valley light just before dark, watching a herd that doesn't know it's being studied, waiting for the exact right moment. And if you ever find yourself alone in the woods at dusk, and the birds go silent, and something in the air shifts in a way you can't quite name, the wolves already know you're there. They've been watching for a while,